Ben and the Bantam by Edwin Waugh, narrated by Malc. Cowle. Chapter 4. We wander there, we wander here, we eye the rose upon the briar, unmindful that the thorn is near among the leaves. Burns. It was about an hour past the stroke of noon when Ben reached the low end of Shawcloth village, a place that he had looked forward to with a kind of dread as he left home, cold and pensive in the morning, being so near the scene of his previous day's adventure. But though Ben was habitually a temperate man, his frank and simple nature was easily misled, and the checkered course of his forenoon's ramble had been so exciting he had thoughtlessly imbibed more drink than was common with him at that time of the day, and it began to take hold of him. He felt unusually jovial and careless, and he trod the highway with a free and wandering step, and an unconstrained mind. The sober outworks of discretion were all thrown down, and the frolic garrison of his heart lay open to an insidious foe. And yet he cast many a sly glance at the doorways and windows of the cottages by the roadside, for he knew that the fame of himself and his donkey would have been ringing through the village during that summer forenoon, and he did not much relish the thought. But care had drowned himself among the nappy, and Ben felt ready for anything that might befall as he walked on by Dimple's side, inspired with alcoholic courage, and more with an air of a conqueror than a culprit. As he sauntered up the slope with a sprig of gorse blossom stuck in his hatband, and one hand laid on Dimple's neck, many a finger was pointed towards him from cottage doors, and many a laughing face stared through the windows with mischievous glee, mingled with no little wonder, for the poor woman's child sat upon the top of the pannier, munching the bread and cheese which Ben had given to it, and gazing with quiet amazement upon the things around it. On the other side of the donkey, the weary, one-faced woman trailed along, with slow and painful steps, holding by the skirt of her child's frock with one hand, her thin and threadbare garments bearing touching evidence of the honourable struggle which decent poverty makes to put its best appearance on, for the poor wayfarer was one of those who would blush to wear a tattered garb, however coarse, whom famine could not reconcile to filth. As they passed slowly up the village, many an old crone stared at the well-known besom maker, and muttered to herself, "Whatever's he up to now?" The inhabitants were mostly woolen weavers in those days, and as they passed the dwelling of one of these artisans, the window of the loom-house was suddenly thrown up, and a merry face looked out and cried, "Hallo, Ben, thou's getting it back, I see." "Getting what back? Thy jackass, I thought tha'd sowed it to th' landlord at Tobe's Yed." "It's here thou sees," replied Ben, "and it owes thee naught that I know on." "And where's beef?" continued the weaver. "Go look," cried Ben, running after his donkey, and walking carelessly on by its side with half-defiant air, as he trolled out in a low voice, "When good King Alfred ruled this land, ruled this land, ruled this land. When good King Alfred ruled this land, he were a goodly king, oh. He stole 3 peck of barley meal, barley meal, barley meal. He stole 3 peck of barley meal to make some dumplings on, oh. He stuck it in great lumps of fat, great lumps of fat, great lumps of fat. He stuck it in great lumps of fat, enough to choke 'em on, oh. Come up, Dimple," said he, giving his donkey's ear a fillip. "Come up, let's get out a seat as soon as we can." And then he took up the same strain again, skipping some verses which he did not remember well. "And what they couldn't eat that day, eat that day, eat that day. And what they couldn't eat that day, the next day they had it fried, oh." "Hallo, Ben," said an old man, who stood smoking at his cottage door. "That sings as if they'd had a lot of brass left there. Where to for? I'm bound a delivering some besoms a bit fur up, replied Ben. Arter for calling at Tobe's Yed. Aye, as belike, have some besoms for 'em. They're quite loaden to-day, continued the old man, looking at the woman and at the child in the pannier. Is that one of thy children that sits atop at jackass? No, replied Ben. It belongs this woman here. I let on her, on t'other side of Yearly Hall, quite stagged up. Why, who is who? Nay, answered Ben, I know not who is, but who's ill tired and who looks ill too. Her husband's been out of work, and he's been taken ill while he was seeking a job in Oldham, and who's bound to him, who looks downhearted. Aye, who does look ill, said the old man, taking a sly glance at her face again. It's 1,000 pities, poor body, who's gooing on a sorry errand. There's nobody knows what's to betide him in this world. Just to think who'd a sixpence if I were to give her one. God bless your old soul, Joan, said Ben. Gi's out at brass. I'll ask her. The poor woman's pale face flushed with a kind of shame, but necessity was strong, and as she took the sixpence she said, You know, and I'm not quite bout, but it will be a bit of an help for me, and I can but thank you. Stop a minute, said the old man. That child may as well have had butter cake. Mary, bring one of those new-baked muffins. The old man's daughter, who'd been listening and watching through the window, ran and brought a well-buttered home-baked cake, big enough for a waggoner's dinner. Here, my lass, said the old man, going up to the child. There's a butter cake for thou. Now, what dost thou say for it? Said the mother. The child had already eaten its fill, and it was so overfaced by the size of the cake and the strange bewilderment of things around that it put its soft knuckle up to its eye and began to cry. Hush, me love, said the mother, taking the cake from the child. Come, I'll lap it up for thy supper. Hush now, we're bound to see thy dad, aren't we? Ben turned away and looked down the road, for his heart was made of soft stuff. But as soon as the woman had pacified her child, he bade the old man good day, and they set off again. Good day, said the old man, and good day to you, mistress. I hope you find things better nor likely at fur end. Ben had not got 50 yards further on his way before a slatternly-looking woman, who was standing by the footpath with a child in her arms, beckoned to him and called out, Here, I say, I want thou a minute. Well, what done you want? Said Ben, walking toward her. What's matter with your Betty? Who looks terrible torn down? Has who been ill or summat? Yon's knowing of our Betty, replied Ben. It's a woman out of Letton, upon road. I'm not but giving her a lift with child. Oh, I see, answered the suspicious jade. What then? Thou be for going for'ard to town we are, daresay. Nay, not I, said Ben. I'm bound for Tobe's Yed, and then he'll go for'ard herself. Oh, replied she, staring after the woman. I like as if I'd seen yon woman afore somewhere. What's who cold? I know not what who's cold, answered Ben, walking away a little nettled by her impertinent curiosity. Who is yon? Ask her yourself. When she'd watched him up the road with an evil eye for a minute or two, she rambled up to the door of the next cottage, where a congenial gossip dwelt. Mally, said she, looking in, and addressing a stout middle-aged woman who was washing the pots after dinner, I never thought yon had as much in him as he has. Who is it? Besom Ben. Him that had his jackass wound up into t' milk chamber yesterday. Nay, sure, replied she, running to the door with the dishcloth in her hand and looking up the road. It's him for sure, and jackass and all. What's he been agate on again? They're saying he's no one reet in his yed. Isn't he, reet? Out off yon for being reet. He's no better nor he should be. He's ta'en up with some mack of a dirty trollops as is let on upon road, and he's carrying her child upon jackass yon. And what's he for wi' her, think'ster? Replied the portly dame, returning to her pots. He's bound to some nook or another, where he thinks nobody knows him. It's a nasty dirty little trick on him, answered the fat pot-washer. I wonder if his wife knows. Who shall do afore morning? Replied the ill-contrived jade. I'll take care of that. And away she sidled to the door of the next cottage, to scatter the baleful influence of her spiteful nature a little further. Ben met with no further interruption until he was within a few yards of the inn, when a lad came running up the road after him, crying out, "Stop, stop! Me mother's comed in. Who says that woman's to come back to our house and get her tea? Tommy Ricker's bound to Oldham wi' cart in half an hour, and he says he'll let her ride." "Byth mum, mistress," said Ben. "That's a nice chance for you. I'm fain you and letting so weel. It'd have been a weary chance to Oldham. Owd Jones a decent chap. He's as good as goose-skins, and they're all alike in that family, Sib and Sib, Rib and Rib. Come, my lass," continued he, lifting the child down from the pannier and putting threepence into its hands, "that's to buy toffee with. Thou'rt bound to ride in a cart with thy mam." The poor woman took up her child in her arms, and when she thanked Ben over and over again in her simple way, but with a full heart, she followed the lad back to the old man's cottage. Ben pulled up in front of the inn, and began to take the besoms from his panniers and lay them down upon the footpath. Twitchell and old Enoch had been hanging about, making holiday all the day, and Enoch was sitting at the window of the tap-room when Ben came up to the front of the house. "Hello," cried Enoch, staring through the window. "Ginger for flirting, he's here again with a golden sallet in his hat." "Who's here?" said Twitch, looking round. "Besom Ben," said Enoch. "Come, I'll fotch him," and he ran to the door and called to him. "Now, Ben, old mon," cried Enoch, "come in, and bring the jackass with thou. I'll stand a pint for that jackass, bite mon." "I'll be in a minute," replied Ben. "These besoms are for landlord." The landlord was coming out of the kitchen as Ben entered with the besoms in his arms. "Hullo," said the landlord. "What, tha's landed safe after all?" "Come in here," continued he, beckoning Ben into the kitchen. "Come in here, Ben. How much are those besoms?" "2 shillings, same as last." "There it is, say thou," replied the landlord, handing the money to him. "Now then, sit thou down here. Never mind yon chaps in tap-room. The dinner'll all be ready in 2 or 3 minutes, and thou may have a bit wi' us if thou likes. It's boiled beef and broth and dumplings. Oh, stop," continued he, remembering himself. "Those chaps agreed to pay for that beef of thine that they stole last night. I should have sent brass up to your house if thou hadn't comed. There it is, say thou." "No," replied Ben, "I'll not have it till they're getting their sheep-shed and stuff back." "Our Betty says who'll not have it in th' house." "Put their brass in thy pocket," replied the landlord, "and eat the sheep-shed and all. It'd sarve 'em right." "Put their brass in thy pocket, Ben," cried the landlady, "and dunna be a fool. I make no count on 'em playing such like tricks. They're carrying things too far. Put it in thy pocket. They ain't more to stir on than thou hast. Thou'st to scrat hard enough for a living. Put it in thy pocket, lad." "Well," replied Ben, pocketing the money, "I'll send 'em sheep-shed and stuff back as soon as I get home, or else I'll bring it myself." "I never would," answered the landlady, setting a pint of ale before him. "Bother nothing about it, but sit still and get that into thou till dinner's ready." "Nay," said Ben, "I'd rather go and deliver me besoms first. I've not but 2 places to call at, old Clement's at Failinge, and at old Jacob's at Crongishaw. I can go to both in under an hour." "Here," replied the landlord, Sit thou still. I'll send Joe with 'em. How much min they be?" Said Ben. "I wish you would send him. I doubt they'd be rigging me about yesterday. I'd rather not face out Jacob if he's yeared o' that doomant. There's 6 besoms for Jacob and 6 for Phalinge folk. It'll be 2 shillin' at either place. I'll give him a pint for going. And I say, Jem, tell him to tak' care at Jackass." "I'll see to it," replied the landlord, walking out at the kitchen door. Whilst Ben was standing with his jackass at the front of the alehouse, taking his besoms out of the panniers, several of the villagers thereabouts had recognised him, and one of them, more officious than the rest, ran to the door of old Mally, whose pitcher was broken by the donkey upsetting her at the end of the lane on the previous night. "Hey, Mally," cries she, "yon chap's at Toes Yed door wi' his jackass again. It's same jackass that knocked you over at Lane End last neet and broke pitcher. If I were you, I'd make him pay. Send your Alec to him and tell him to crack a fetching law if he don't turn up some brass. Be sharp here." "I will do so," said old Mally, hobbling out at the back of the cottage and calling to her grandson who was in the garden. "I will do so. Alec, the jackass chap's yon is at Toes Yed. Go thee and make him pay, or else have him taken up." Just as the landlord was leaving the kitchen to give directions to Joe about the delivery of Ben's besoms, the old woman's grandson came clattering up the steps and in at the front door. The landlord met him full in the face as he was running towards the door of the tap-room. Here, said the landlord, stopping him. "What art thou after? I'll not have thee in there." "Where's chap that belongs that jackass at door?" said the lad, pointing to Dimple. "What dost thou want with chap that belongs that jackass?" inquired the landlord. "I want paying for damage that he did last neet," replied the young fellow, with an impudent air, "and I'll have it too, or else he'll have to go afore Clement." "Why, has he done thee some damage?" continued the landlord, restraining his rising temper. "No," answered the young fellow, "but his jackass knocked me grandmother o'er at th' end at Lane last night and broke a pitcher and shedded milk, and who'll have to be paid, or else who'll fetch a summons on him." "What mak of a pitcher was it?" "It were a quart pitcher," replied the lad, "a blue and white un." "Well, say thou," answered the landlord, fetching a quart pitcher from the bar. "Give her that. And here," continued he, "there's a shilling for her too. Who's not a bit worth? I've seen her this morning. Off with thou, while thou'rt wheel." "Is this all I mun have, then?" said the lad, looking at the shilling. "It's all thou mun have, my lad," replied the landlord, "unless thou wants a bat at ribs." "Are you no unbound to pay for milk at the shed, then?" continued the unscrupulous mannikin. "How much milk war there?" inquired the landlord. "Better than half a gallon," replied the lad. "What, in a quart pitcher?" said the landlord. "Come off with thou, or I'll give thou a lift behind with me foot. Off with thou towards that door-hole. I know you. You'd skin 2 devils for one hide. If thy grandmother wants that more, send her to me. Come, shap off." The lad went slouching towards the doorway, muttering sulkily that the thing was not done with yet. His grandmother were no unbound settle under a sovereign. The landlord followed him to the front, and as he watched the lad lounge across the street, he said to himself, "A wastrel gang, that." Then, taking Dimple by the bridle, he led him into the backyard, where Joe was at work swilling the flags. "Here, Joe," said the landlord, "put that bucket down a bit. I've a nice job for thou." Joe set down his bucket, and when the landlord had given him instructions about the delivery of Ben's besoms, he started away with Dimple, a little tickled with the novelty of the job. The landlord shouted after him up the road, telling him to put the donkey up in the stable as soon as he returned, and then he went in to dinner, which was just ready. "Come, Ben, my lad," said the landlord, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Get a bit of dinner into thou. Wilt have a bowl of broth?" "Well, thank you," replied Ben. "There," said the landlady, setting a steaming basin before him. "Get those into thou. They'll do thou good." The broth was mad hot, and between blowing and supping, Ben had full employment for a few minutes. "Wilt have a dumpling, Ben?" said the landlord, seeing that Ben was finishing his broth. "Aye," answered Ben. "There's nobody likes dumplings better than me." The landlady handed a plate of dumpling to him, and the dinner went on with few words thrown away. Ben had finished his dumplings, and he was just beginning to attack the beef and potatoes when Enoch came to the kitchen door. "Come, old mon," said Enoch. "That's a great while we're filling. I could ha' eaten a cow by now. Be sleepy, or else we'll come in here. Mun we come into kitchen, Jem?" No, cried the landlady. "Keep where you are. We han no room here. Off with you, till we han getten a dinner o'er. He'll not be mony minutes." Before the dinner was quite over, Joe came smiling in from delivering his besoms. "That's soon back," said Ben, speaking with his mouth half full. "How did 'te go on, old lad?" "All right," replied Joe, putting the money on the table. "Here's the brass said out, 4 shilling. "Well, and what said they?" "Oh, why, I said nobody at old Clement's, no but Jem, coachman, and he asked what they were, so I told him, and he went in and got brass for me, and they brought me a pint of ale to t' door." "Well, and how did 'te go on at Cronkishaw? Did 'te see th' old chap? I dare say he'd wonder how it were as I didn't come wi' him mysel." "Nay," said Joe, "I didn't leet of old Jacob. I seed nobody about, no but a bit of a lad Malc with a hoop, and a chap with a spade on his shoulder. He looked as if he'd been working in the garden. So I asked him if old Jacob were about, and he said that he were gone up Whitworth Road a seeing one at Thons that had been taken ill, and he'd ta'en one at younger end at lads with him, that were called after hisself. So I went into the yard and reached up to the back door." "Thou should ha' gone to the counting house, mon," said Ben. "Oh, bother no one," continued Joe. "It were all right. As soon as I knocked, mistress come to the door, and who asked what were to do, that thou hadn't come thyself. Well, to tell thou truth, I told her a lie. I said that there were no one so well, and I'd had to come for thou and such like. And then who asked out th' wife and childer were, well, I made up some mack of a tale about those two. As I had to go to the devil for telling lies for thee, Ben, I shall be got. And then who wanted to know what ailed thou, like, and I said I thought it were rheumatism or summat of that, for they were terrible ill on th' inside. Thee, Joe, for a sup yed, thou shouldn't ha' said so, mon. What didst thou say beside?" "Well," replied Joe, "I'll be hanged if I can tell justly. I know one thing, I never named that do-it the hard-wit jackass. But I'd hard worked out for laughing when mistress looked at Dimple as it stood there. I think who aimed at sending thou some physic or summat. Thou knows there are mack of doctors among poor folk, no but they never charging naught, and they gan to romming a bit of meat and stuff into nooks where there is no one. There were one at lads, a stiff settin', come running into the yard with a face as red as that fire. He'd been malking up front with 2 or 3 more for a little wood school, and they'd had football wi' 'em, summer and all as it were, and they'd sent it slap through window. Mistress asked him who broke parlour window, and he said, me. So who told him like he shouldn't have done so, but he reckoned that he couldn't help it because he didn't like to miss his punts. By mon, he's a pluckin' is that lad, or else I'm swapped." "Oh, I know him," said Ben. "He catched me in th' hole with a snowball as I were going through th' yard last Christmas." "I tell thou what, Ben," continued Joe, "there were a little lass coming to the door with mistress. Old lad, if ever I'd seen an angel, it's that little lass. That face never were made in this world. It's too good for this cow country as yon, or else I'm jetted. Oh, and I let on Absalom the carter, as I were coming away. He'd been carrying dinners out to a lot of out folk upon Cronkishaw. I dare say, replied Ben. It's one of owd Absalom's jobs, is that? Well, come, Joe, said the landlady, get thy dinner, and let's have this table sided, so that these lasses can begin o' their ironing. All right, replied Joe, flinging his cap upon the dresser, and pulling a chair up to the table, as old Enoch came into the kitchen again. Now then, Ben, said Enoch, holding his hand out, as if he was making a speech, art bound to come, or thou'rt? We want him now to give us a bit of a song. They're for having a do all round. Twitch says he'll start the first if thou'll sing after him. Come on with thou. If thou'll let me alone 5 minutes longer, said Ben, I'll be ready for aught. Well, I'll time thee, replied Enoch, walking to the tap room.